Well, folks, it appears we got some great news when it comes to the price point of Nintendo Switch 2, specifically here in the United States. That, man, this update's actually exactly what we wanted to hear, and I can't wait to dive a little bit deeper into that. Also, a brand new feature for Nintendo Switch 2 has potentially been teased by an all-new patent released by Nintendo this year. So we got to dive into that as well, because it actually is very fascinating and could affect how you actually play your games with the new Joy-Con controller. So without further ado, folks, I am Nathaniel Robojans from Nintendo Prime, and we're on our road to 150,000 subscribers. So if you're enjoying all of this amazing content and you want more, go ahead and subscribe to this channel as we head towards that goal here in 2025. All right. We got to talk about the price point of Nintendo Switch 2. Look, there is no price for it yet, but there has been a major concern brought up by many of you, and it gets brought up every single live stream. I see it brought up in response to some of my, my posts over on Twitter or Blue Sky or Threads or pretty much everywhere on the internet. This seems to be a popular talking point because it's something that keeps hitting the news that we can't just keep ignoring, and that is tariffs. Obviously, we know there is a brand new president in the United States, and while we do avoid politics here on this channel, we do have to pay some attention when those politics might indeed impact our ability to buy something. And so there's been major concern with the tariffs implemented by the new regime in the United States that the cost for something like the Switch 2 is going to be massively impacted by this. Now, look, last time this person was president, they also had extreme tariffs at the time. However, there was an exemption given to consumer electronics, which meant the PlayStation, the Xbox, the Switch 2, or the base Switch, I guess I should say in this case, were not impacted at all. But we don't know if those exemptions are going to exist this time around. Also, it takes months for tariffs to actually go into action, so we wouldn't know if those exemptions exist anyways, probably until summer. That being said, we probably don't have to worry about them at all in regards to Switch 2, at least if this industry insider, who is literally a financial analyst, this is what he does for a living, has anything to say on this, and this person is David Gibson. Let's go over and look at what he said over on Twitter. He said, China tariff impact on Switch 2 launch in the U.S., 0. When Trump had his first term, Nintendo with Hoseidon decided to try and get 50% of their production from Vietnam. So Vietnam's production will supply to the United States, and China, etc., will supply to the rest of the world. Smart. And I noticed at the time when Nintendo started putting all their assembly, or a lot of assembly, in Vietnam, that right now, Vietnam is currently not being impacted by any sort of tariffs at the moment, from at least additional tariffs other than what they were already paying from the new regime. So if they just ship things in from that country, this won't have any impact. Now, could tariffs come along for Vietnam? Maybe, but Vietnam is not the same sort of provider of goods to the United States the way that China and Taiwan is. So right now, they are not subject to the new tariffs. But as we go and look here, he says, obviously, if tariffs go into Vietnam, imports into the U.S., then that changes the outcome. PlayStation 5, not so lucky, but Sony might scale up non-China production to help solve the problem. And what he's noting there is that Sony didn't make the same decision Nintendo made last time around, where Nintendo started to diversify where units are actually assembled. It's not about where the parts are made, it's where the final units are assembled and shipped from, and Nintendo diversified that last time that this person was president, but Sony never did it. And granted, there was an exemption, so that diversification didn't seem needed, but now that things have come back around, this diversification may actually be to Nintendo's benefit, simply because that country they're getting them made in is not one currently being targeted for these sort of taxes. Again, that could change over time, and eventually there could just be a blanket 25% tariff on all goods coming into the U.S., but that doesn't seem to be what the target for them is right now. They're very specifically targeting the countries that America seems to owe a lot of money to, and Vietnam is not one of those countries. So take that for what you will. I don't obviously know how any of this is going to play out, but I do trust David Gibson when he says, at least at the moment, this will have like a non-factor issue for Nintendo specifically. It'll be a much bigger factor for Sony, who hasn't diversified where their units are assembled. They're probably going to have to do that and assemble them somewhere else if they want to keep the prices down here in the US, or they could just hike the prices up, because reality, that's what happens. When it gets more expensive to get products here, the prices are going to go up. So I've been saying this whole time that while we don't know the price of the Nintendo Switch 2, and I am not concerned about this, it is still something people are going to continue to be concerned about as the news keeps circulating about how it's going to impact other parts of the United States. But hey, as I said, until the price is announced and until we need to worry about this, we really shouldn't worry about it. That's always been my take on this, is that nothing's actually happened yet that actually would make it more expensive. We just have a lot of assumptions without any facts. So let's wait and see what the price ends up being revealed, which, by the way, the price could be revealed as soon as tomorrow. Nintendo does have an investors meeting, and they'll be giving updates on the Switch, and they'll be asked a lot about Switch 2, and it's possible they have a little bit of news for us tomorrow. Last time they had an investors meeting, they told us about backwards compatibility. This time they could tell us a release date, they could tell us a price point, they could tell us about a new feature maybe for the new Joy-Con, because we also have some news in regard to that, thanks to a brand new patent. Now, again, it's always important to note, patents are not necessarily fact, in that it could just be a canceled idea, but it's interesting since it was recently published after the Nintendo Switch 2 was revealed. Here we are over at Nintendo Life, where it says a mysterious patent hints at a predictive input for Nintendo Switch 2. So kind of like rollback netcode, but at the hardware level. Interesting. So what if your controller could sense your next move? That's hardly science fiction after all. Rollback netcode is used in many leading fighting games to do just that. But a patent has been spotted by Tom's Guide and Game Rant, which hints that Nintendo could look into include it in the Switch 2 at a hardware level. The patent was filed by the Japanese company in August 2024 and published on January 23rd of this year. It appears to be a system that tracks button presses and directional movements with the goal of predicting the next possible input sequence. The apparent upside is the system will be able to learn from your button inputs in certain games and use that data to speed things up, such as commonly repeated menu selections. Rollback netcode does a similar thing, but in that mechanic, the system is predicting the next input and rolling back if the player's input is different, rather than memorizing a sequence of inputs. As with many patents, it's important to note that just because this has been filed doesn't mean it'll actually happen. However, it's certainly an interesting prospect and one of the many ways Nintendo can make Switch 2 different from its forerunner. Now, what's interesting here isn't so much how this all works. I know that's kind of small for you guys. It's why Nintendo would implement it at a hardware level. When it's implemented in fighting games, it's because of the online aspect. There's a lot of latency and lag and different internet stuff going on. So what they're trying to do is make your button inputs more one-to-one with what's happening on screen as you're playing online. And so if they could, be predictive of what your future button presses are going to be, they can make those actions much quicker to happen, lowering the latency and creating a much smoother experience. That's why rollback netcode has been widely used in every fighting game basically in existence that has an internet connection. Why you would put it at the hardware level, though, I think is fascinating. And I think if this is implemented, it has to do not with online gameplay, although yeah, you're going to probably need rollback netcode for that as well. It's going to be because of the latency that's introduced with certain aspects of deep learning super sampling, or as we like to call it around here, how Nintendo's going to upscale and make your games look absolutely awesome at high resolutions without actually outputting at those resolutions. One thing about a lot of the stuff that gets ignored is every time you're using some sort of upscaler, every time you're using something to help with the frame rates and all that, it does introduce more and more latency into your game, and so that could create an unpleasant experience if the latency ever gets too high. Well, one way to potentially combat that is if at a hardware level, it's already learning how you play and making predictive movements, predictive button presses based on what you typically would do in that given situation. Now, this might sound a little scary in that you could be playing something like Tears of the Kingdom and you go to attack, but this time you actually mean to backflip, and instead the game attacks instead of backflipping, even though you naturally did the backflip combo. But the thing is these predictive things don't actually replace your button hits. What they do is at the moment that there's any minor detection that you might have hit that button, it just goes ahead and does that action, rather than waiting for the full sequence of that button press to go through. The moment the game realizes you didn't actually hit that and its prediction was incorrect, it cancels that and just goes back to the default latency of whatever the button movement you're supposed to do is. That's how it works with the online stuff, and that's probably how it would work here, where it's really just trying to make things feel a bit smoother on the gameplay experience, but you can still cancel whatever that predictive movement is and do something else entirely, because it's not going to do that movement until it gets that initial sense of the button. And you might go, well, if it gets that initial sense, yeah, there's a lot of back and forth. It's basically eliminating some of that back and forth between the controller and the console. As soon as it gets that in, it's not going to send something back out if it predicted it correctly. It's just going to do it. Anyways, this is obviously something that we won't really think about. If you play a lot of fighting games and you play them online, you probably don't think about this either. You just play the game. The idea of something like this would be to help with that input latency, to help things feel smoother, and the player would be none the wiser. That's really the idea here. That's one reason why you put it at the hardware level. Just like Nintendo's highly likely not even going to talk about AI upscaling, I would be shocked if Nintendo actually in the April 2nd Direct does talk about AI upscaling. If they do, it's probably because NVIDIA wants them to talk about it because they're very proud of the work they did. But if they don't, that should be expected because Nintendo doesn't like to get into the nitty-gritty details. They just want us to play the games, enjoy them, and know they look fantastic. That's usually the Nintendo way of doing things. So I would fully suspect that is, if this is implemented, it's something we'll discover through data mining and all that. It's not going to be something that Nintendo's going to advertise. This is just something put in there to improve our gameplay experience. So take that for what you will. Again, this all assumes that this patent even happens. Again, it was filed in August of 2024. Which was before, obviously, the Switch 2 was revealed, but it didn't get published publicly till after, meaning that anything published right now after Switch 2 reveal happened, we do have to take some serious consideration because that's typically how patents work. Anything published before a reveal, oftentimes you can ignore that. Stuff published after a reveal, that's all speculative now and could actually make it into the system. And this would be probably a welcome addition, assuming that it just kind of works. Obviously, there could be problems with it as well, so maybe it doesn't get used. But again, I would assume all that got worked out if they did go this way. Anyways, this is also just something that's applying just to something like Super Smash Bros. And has nothing to do with every single game on the platform. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting because the patent definitely indicates this is hardware level and not just online. So take that for what you will. I am Nathaniel Rovajans from Nintendo Prime. Let me know what you think about all this stuff down in the comments below. And as always, I'll catch you guys in the next video.